Alrighty, we're into Genesis and we're into verse number 8. And now we are going to move into the 8th verse of the book of Genesis in relationship to the God pod located on the back of the $1 bill, this being the God pod as described to you from the person who is the author of a revolutionary new book called Angels on the Ark by Michael Fazio, describing several hundred different verses in the Bible that directly relate to the pictographs on the back of the $1 bill. And moving on to verse 8, and God called the firmament heaven. This is God. The firmament in the midst of the waters is the Lord God, because he represents heaven. The pyramid, because this was God's first comeback miracle during the time of the first dynasty in Egypt. And at that point he gave this as a gift to another remnant society of peoples that eventually he wiped out because they didn't follow the rules of God. Although I can't be sure of that, it seems to be the one common denominator that God does is that he gives society everything it needs to be flourishing, and then if they don't flourish along the proper lines, he wipes them out. Same thing that's going to happen in about 18 to 24 months. God is going to dissolve the United States of America as an entity, or the promised land, and we are going to move into the end of times. But now we are talking about verse 8. God called the firmament heaven. The firmament, the Great Pyramid, the eye above the Great Pyramid represents the light coming from heaven. The promised land represented on the Great Pyramid represents the promised land. Heaven is also considered the promised land. When you die and go to the promised land, you go to heaven. Therefore God called the firmament heaven, the firmament being the pyramid and the eye of providence. He called this heaven, and there we have heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. God rested on the second day after he created everything that you see and everything that has been described, aka the firmament, the promised land, America, 1776, the firmament, the Great Pyramid, God's first Ark of the Covenant after the colony of Atlantis, the firmament, aka the eye of providence. Okay, moving on to verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into or unto one place, and let dry land appear, and it was so. Okay, God said, let the waters under heaven be gathered together unto one place. Okay, under heaven, if this is the light coming from heaven, let us just interpolate that this segment and the apex is heaven. And then let us interpolate that the waters under heaven be gathered together unto one place. Okay. This is one body of water. This is a second body of water. This is a third body of water. This is a fourth body of water. The landmass starts here, and this happens to be a body of water that circumvents the entire sphere known as the deep. Let the waters under heaven be gathered together unto one place. The waters under heaven gathered together unto one place you can be seen as the entire background behind the Great Pyramid. Now, in real life, that could be the Nile, or it could represent the oceans. For the sake of the Bible and the $1 bill, there are a limited amount of pictographs that can be discerned and created for any given verse in the Bible. Therefore, take it upon my understanding to be true, because this is what will be represented throughout the entire work of the Bible as the bodies of water, which is parts of these orange marks are part of another pictograph I described later on. Therefore, the bodies of water that were gathered unto one place are the bodies of water that are gathered behind the Great Pyramid, and therefore that completes verse 9 as far as the waters are concerned. Now we have the second segment of the sentence, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. This segment of earth that you see shrubs, and although this might look like a shrub and this might look like a shrub, as I noted before, these stones are anywhere from 8 to 12 feet high each stone. Therefore this shrub here could be 24 feet, could be 30 feet, it could be 38 feet, depending on how far down the sand is, how far away these shrubs are from the pyramid, the angle of inclination, the angle of attack that the picture was taken from or pictograph was created from. But this in fact represents dry land in that it has shrubbery and or trees. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, aka earth, which would make sense because 1776 is represented in Roman numerals as the promised land, land, earth. Pyramid sits on top of earth, pyramid sits on top of land, aka land, and verse 9 is done. And God called the dry land earth, verse 10, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Okay, verse 10 is now complete. And God said in verse 11, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, and upon the earth, and it was so. This is simple. God said, let the earth bring forth grass. Grass. Grass could be represented as any part of this green design work that you see under the Great Pyramid. It would also make sense that the grass would grow thicker at the base of the pyramid, because the pyramid would act as a gutter where the water would come down, flow along the face of the four faces of the pyramid, and more grass would grow along the base than away from the base, because this is where the water would coalesce. And the Lord God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herb yielding seed. This is a little bit more difficult to see, but grass is typically a low-lying shrub, anywhere from a foot to 2.5, possibly 3 feet, depending on the gene structure of the grass. But if this was grass, if this small stuff here is represented as grass, it would make sense that the herb yielding seed and would be the next size pictographs, herb bearing seed would be this, the next size bigger in the pictograph forms, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind. Now, if each one of these stones represent, well, if this is 458 feet, each one of these stones represent almost 20 feet of height. So, excuse me, almost 30 feet in height. Okay, so the Lord said, bring forth the grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree. These on either side of the base of the Great Pyramid could easily be discerned as trees, because they are certainly as high as the first set of blocks and halfway up the second, which would mean they would have to be somewhere close to 30 feet tall. After his kind in and of itself, the fruit trees were created upon the earth, and it was so. Therefore, at this point, verse number 10 will be the next verse we will discuss. Verse number 9 is, for all intent and purposes, done. End of verse number 9 in the book of Genesis.